I just want to go ahead and say welcome to our South Campus and our online campus. I got to be at our South location last week, and it was just so awesome to be there. I love you guys, and online campus, we always love and appreciate you. And Wilmington campus, it's so good to see you. You guys look great. I'm really excited to speak with you today. Give me just a second to get my notes, because there are quite a few. So in 2017, we preached a series here at 828 Church on the book of Esther, and it was just an amazing, amazing series. One of my favorites. Growing up as a pastor's kid, I traveled with my parents all over the place. I remember one year in Virginia, my dad preached literally for an entire year. He preached at a different church every weekend, whatever that is, 52 straight weeks, and we were just always going and hearing him preach. And when you're a traveling preacher, you have an opportunity to share a few words a lot. You don't necessarily have to come up with new content every week. And my dad preached on Esther, and it was always my favorite story. I just loved the story of Esther, and it really just stuck with me. But in 2017, we preached a 5-week series on Esther because there's just so much content in there. It's so good. But today I'm going to take 5 weeks and try to cram it into one message. So buckle up, because we are about to be moving. But before we get into this, I kind of wanted to give you guys a little background on myself. So I have a picture here that you guys can see. I know a lot of you know me, but for anyone that doesn't know me, this is my amazing family. So this is Grace and Judah, and then my wife Christy, who was leading us in worship this morning. And the song "My Testimony" always makes me laugh because I've been singing that song for a long time. And it says at one point, Grace rewrote my story. And every time I sing it, I'm like, yeah, she did. But I love them. They're so amazing, and I'm so thankful for them. And so I studied film in school. So I have a degree in video production and digital arts. I love film. I love movies. I just really enjoy it. Mike Steinkamp, one of our drummers here, he also does film. And anytime he releases something and the shots are cool, I'm like, bro, that was awesome. Those shots were epic. So my brain often tends to see things from a movie perspective. And our story today is just, it's incredible. Like, I don't know that someone could write this story now if they had to. Like, it's just one of those things. Sometimes true stories are like the wildest. You're like, how could that have actually happened? So before we jump in, I want to play a quick game with you guys, because this story, it really reminds me kind of a fairy tale, like ones we've watched growing up, except this one really happened. But we're going to throw a couple of slides up on the screen, and I want you guys to see. You can just call it out, see if you know what it is. All right, so what movie would this be? Cinderella? All right, good. Let's go to the next one. This one. Okay, yep. I actually had to look that one up. I didn't watch a lot of Disney princess movies, but now that I see it, I should have got it. We go to the next one. This is my favorite. Yes, just volcano chicken. I love it. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, this one's a little bit tougher. Some of you older people should get this one. What? Princess Bride? Yes, that is correct. Nice one. All right, and this is our last one. This one's tough, sorry. All right, I'm going to tell you. This is the story of Esther. I made that one. That's probably why it's harder. Yeah. So, again, coming back to that, thanks, you guys can move on. But movies and stories, they just fascinate me. So when I was breaking the story down, I was really looking at it as a filmmaker, as someone that likes movies. So I'm going to give you guys just a quick run through, and then we're going to get moving. So the main characters of our story, we have Esther, Mordecai, King Xerxes, and we have Haman, okay? Then the location and time. So the story of Esther picks up about 60 years after the life of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 5, we learned about God writing a message on the wall to the arrogant king of Babylon, King Belshazzar. Daniel interpreted this vision to mean the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and that night the empire was overtaken by the Persian Empire. King Belshazzar was killed by King Darius. Okay, so some of y'all, you're like, oh, history, boring. My dad often talks about history. I like history. You often are shaped by your parents, and here I am. And so it fascinates me. But we just were in the Daniel series right before we came to our story series, and I think it's just fascinating how when you really dive into historical data, how you see the Bible. It's just woven straight through. So as I was preparing the story and realizing, okay, now we're in the Persian Empire here, and King Darius, who was the king of the Persian Empire that took down the Babylonian Empire when Daniel was alive. So now we're fast forward 60 years, and King Darius's grandson is King Xerxes. I just think that's really fascinating. So where did this take place? Okay, so this was in the Median Persian Empire. I have a map of that. We'll throw up here real quick. But this empire is massive. I'll try to move around so everyone can see it. But their empire stretched all the way from Africa to India. This was a massive, massive empire. And that's where we find ourselves beginning our story. All right, so you got the characters, you got the setting, you got the scene, time. You guys ready? All right, buckle up, because we're about to hit it. So Act 1, I broke it again down into different sections. So I call this Act 1, Esther's Rise to Power. So beginning in Esther Chapter 1, verse 1, this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. At the time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia, Media, and the princes, the nobles, and the provinces were present. Okay, so basically here we are. We're in Persia. We're in the capital city of Susa, and here's King Xerxes, and he's brought in people from all over his empire, from all over the kingdom, for basically a 180-day party. Like, that is a long party. Like, I don't want to go to a 180-day party. Shoot, I barely want to go to like a one-day party. But kids are a great excuse to get you out of going to stuff. But this 180-day festival, this thing is massive. Like, this is just an event. And so again, chasing down from a historical standpoint, looking at this story, we see that this was 3 years before the Persian Empire attacked Greece. So this is most likely was like a planning thing. So they brought in military officials, leaders. King Xerxes is just showing off how much money he has, how much power he has, and really just trying to encourage these leaders and encourage everyone to band together, take this empire, expand it more, go fight Greece. And who in here has seen the movie 300? I'm not recommending it, but I have seen it. And this is the King Xerxes that fought against Leonidas. So again, I just find all of that really interesting. So I'm going to paraphrase some of this just so we can get moving. So here in the story, 180-day party, and then this festival, this party comes to an end, and what does he decide to do? He's just having so much fun. He was like, you know what? Let's keep partying. So King Xerxes threw the first after party that's ever happened. And he took basically all of his boys, all of his high-ranking officials, the people in the palace, and he said, come into the palace, stay with me for a week, and we're just going to party hard. So the Bible literally says that he told his servants, keep the wine, keep the food coming, and we are just going to go for it. So this party was for his inner circle at the palace and lasted for 7 days, as I said. He told his servants to bring as much food and wine as they could drink. And as you can imagine, the men got super drunk. And as drunk people often do, King Xerxes made a bad decision. He decided it would be a good idea to order his wife, Queen Vashti, who was known for her beauty, to come and parade around for him and the boys so everyone could enjoy her beauty. All right, so we've got a guy with his friends. He's inebriated. He's making bad decisions. He asks for his wife to come parade around. I don't think anybody's wife would be stoked about that, nor should they be. And in that culture particularly, that would have been considered extremely shameful. And I've glazed over this fact a lot when I've just read this story, but I think it's kind of hilarious that Queen Vashti's like, nah, I'm not doing it. Because in the Persian Empire, King Xerxes would have been considered basically a god. He would have been considered, we saw this with the Babylonian Empire, when a law or something is made, when the king makes it, there's no way to go back on it. And that was because they believed that it was from the gods. And so when he asked her to come, like this guy never gets told no. And Queen Vashti's like, nah, I'm not doing that. And so when she does that, she basically tells him no. He doesn't like it. He's inebriated. He's been told no. He gets really upset. And he asks his also inebriated friends, because bad decisions love bad company. And he asked them what they should do. And they're basically like, oh, you can't let this stand. You got to get rid of her. Fire the queen, banish her from your presence, make a law for it. And so that takes us to our first take-home truth. He liked that counsel, by the way, and he decided to do it. So our first take-home truth today is, just because we like the counsel doesn't mean it's good counsel. It actually probably means it isn't great. And I think in today's society, it's really easy to find people that agree with you, that think the same way you do. And just because you do and you can doesn't always mean that it's great counsel. We have to continually take the counsel of others, which again is important, and put it against what the Bible says. That's really how we can know. Because, as Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? So the king's friends gave him bad counsel. They said he should banish the queen from his presence for this act of affiance. So he did. And that takes us to chapter 2. So in chapter 2, we have the king sobering up. He realizes he's banished his wife from his presence. And this makes him sad because he liked his wife. He liked having a wife, enjoyed having a queen. And he gets pretty upset with his friends that gave him this counsel. And so they're trying to figure out, what do we do? What should we do? And they have this idea. Okay, we're going to hold this contest. We're going to take the most beautiful women from all over the Persian Empire. We're going to bring them in, and we're going to teach them. We're going to do beauty treatments with them, and then you can pick the person that you like the best. And he's like, all right, I could get behind this idea. And so that's where we come in Esther chapter 2, verse 5. And just so you guys know, there was so much scripture, I told the screens team to not put it up there. So that's why it's not up there. I'm just going to read it, paraphrase some of it, and story time with Jake today. I should have worn a sweater vest. Steven said I should have brought some slippers and taken my shoes off like Mr. Rogers. So Esther chapter 2, verse 5. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Another tie back there. Among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her in as his own daughter when her father and mother had died. So again, I just find it so fascinating here that we see Mordecai and Esther in the Persian Empire, living their lives, following God, being true, and they are descendants of the Jews that were brought over, again, back to Daniel, in the exile when Babylonian Empire came and took over Jerusalem and took the Jews back. So these are obviously we don't know if they're descendants of Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, but they're descendants of that group of Jews that came over. And I just think it's just such a testimony to see here a group of people that in a foreign land, in a foreign place, stayed true to what they believed, stayed true to the Lord. It's just really awesome. So picking back up in verse 8, when the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out if Esther was okay and what was happening to her. So I think that's, again, just a really powerful that's really powerful for me because, God not only calls us to do stuff, he not only gets us out of our comfort zone, but he doesn't call us to do it alone. He's there with us. He's there watching over us. And that takes us to a take-home truth that God won't ask you to do something and then leave you alone. So this story, again, I know I'm moving. I don't want you to miss it. Just the incredibleness of it. So this story is just an example of God's divine power and his divine planning and his providence. So here, again, we've got king gets drunk, fires his wife, beauty contest. Esther, who's in the city where the palace is, and whose uncle, Mordecai, has raised her. He's her cousin, but basically like an uncle, raises her. And then he, again, by God's providence, is already working in the palace. So not only is he just in the same city. He's in the palace where he can check up on her. Not a mistake. Continuing with verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any other woman, and she won his favor and approval more than any other. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet called Esther's banquet for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberty. So what we see here is an orphan girl raised by her cousin who is now the queen and been given a holiday. Just this story is pretty incredible. It's like, wow, what an amazing, just favor of God that she's gone from this spot to this spot. But we're just getting started. God loves to give favor to the faithful, even in a fallen land and culture. Esther was faithful to God, and he was faithful to her. We serve such an amazing God who, honestly, even when we're not faithful to him, he's still faithful to us. But when we're faithful to him, we can sure know he's going to be faithful to us. So I'm going to paraphrase here for a second. But basically, so we've got Esther. She's queen now. She's doing great. And Mordecai, her cousin, he's a gatekeeper in the king's palace. So Mordecai is just doing his job one day, being faithful, being who God made him to be. And he overhears a plot to kill King Xerxes. He hears a couple of other guards planning. They're upset with the king, and they decided they're going to take him out. And so Mordecai reaches out to Esther and says, hey, these guys are trying to kill the king. I think you need to tell him, you need to warn him. And so they investigate. They find this to be true, and those guys are they're taken and they're executed. And Esther tells the king that it was Mordecai who had uncovered this plot. And right here we see that Mordecai, again, was just being who God made him to be. So I have this take-home truth right here that says, do the right thing because doing the right thing is the right thing to do. And that's something my dad used to always say to me. Kind of sounds like him when I just read it right then. But he used to say that to us all the time. And I love that here Mordecai, he just went back to his job. He wasn't like looking for something from the king. He wasn't doing it because he thought he would get something in return. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do and because God made him to be the kind of person that would do the right thing. And that is who God made us to be. Can we get back to being people of God like this? Not looking out for us first, but always looking out, or not looking out for us first, or always looking for what we think we deserve, but just being godly, good and honest, because that's who God made us to be. Micah 6:8 says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. These characteristics defined Mordecai as a person. All right, Act 2, enter the villain, Haman. It's picking up chapter 3, verse 3. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, the Hammedatha, some big words in here, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than any of the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's commands? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. So here we see Haman. This is our first glimpse at him. He's the villain of the story. He is one of the king's officials, and the king really likes him, so the king promotes him to second in command of the kingdom. So here's Haman. He's proud of himself. He thinks he's awesome. He goes through this gate every day on his way home. And there's all these people that are bowing to him. Honestly, from the text here we see Haman wasn't, at least initially, privy to the fact that Mordecai wasn't bowing. He just saw everyone else bowing. But it was the other people that kind of ratted him out. They were like, oh, you need to bow. You need to do this. And then they ratted him out. They tried to cancel him is what they tried to do. It's hard to stand for a conviction that others seem disinterested in, but God gives convictions to each of us and calls us to stand in them no matter what pressures we face. Our first allegiance is always to God and to his word. I think we obviously, there's a lot there, but when God places a conviction in us, one of the most powerful things we can do is walk in it. And again, I love how we see that Mordecai, he wasn't, I don't think from reading the text that he was being obnoxious. I don't think he's just standing in front of the horse, saying, I won't bow. He knew his conviction, knew who God called him to be, knew that he only bowed for one king, the one true king, and that he wasn't gonna do it because that's who God made him to do. But again, he wasn't being crazy about it. Esther Chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. When Haman saw for himself that Mordecai didn't bow down and kneel before him, he was outraged. So they rat on him. Haman sees it and he's outraged. So what is your Haman? What is our Haman's? What are those things for us? Is it a popular opinion? Is it culture's way? Is it political correctness? God gave us a message and we're called to stand for it no matter who else does. I think that's a hard thing to do in 2023. At least the world tries to make it really difficult. And I know some of y'all just got excited, but I'm not talking about being crazy on social media. I'm not talking about fighting with everybody. I'm not talking about that, okay? I'm talking about standing firm and loving well. That's what we're called to do. We're called to stand firm but love well. Take home truth for us today. I've got 3 back-to-back here. Instead of cursing the darkness, try turning on a light. We can yell, we can be mad, we can do all this and that. That's not doing anything. But we can turn on a light. We can show people what it looks like to live free, to live well, to love well, and to stand firm in conviction. There is actually no greater witness than a life lived with love and unwavering conviction. Chris Hodges said this in a book. I think he got it from someone else, but he said, truth without love is mean, but love without truth is meaningless. And this has really stuck with me because it's so true. I mean, the extremes are easy. That's where people like to live. So there's I'm going to say the truth, and I don't care how it affects you. I don't care how you take it. I don't care what it does to you. I'm just going to scream it at you because it's true. And that doesn't change the fact that the truth is truth. God gave us a message. It's pretty clear. And the way we communicate it is important, though. So, again, if you're just doing the truth without love, it's not going to be received. You're just going to seem like a huge jerk. On the flip side, it's easy to say, I just love you. I love everybody. I love y'all. I love you. I don't care what you're doing. I just want to care about you and love you. That's not love. You can't say you care about someone and watch them destroy their lives, watch them do decisions and do things that are leading them down a path to destruction. That's not love. I heard an atheist speaking once, and he said his biggest complaint and the reason why he didn't believe in God the most was because if Christians really believed that he was going to hell, why had no one ever tried to save him? And that hit me. We can stand firm in what God's called us to do, but we can also love well. And that's something that Mordecai did extremely well. So moving on, yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom. So this guy, he's like, not only am I going to kill you because I'm mad at you, I'm going to kill your whole family. I'm going to kill everybody you know. Haman had a problem. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pure was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, so a year from then. And Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among all the peoples in your province of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all the other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. Is it in the king's best interest to tolerate them? If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administration for the royal treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his finger, gave it to Haman the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, and said, keep the money, do with the people as you please. So here, this scripture is just so relevant to today, but saying, hey, here's a group of people, they don't live like everybody else. They're trying to live their lives different. They're separate. We don't like it. Let's get rid of them. Let's take them out. And the king, poor Xerxes, easily manipulated, just says, okay, cool, keep the money, do with the people as you would like. So this is obviously a huge issue for God's people. They're facing genocide. And I think it's interesting here that this decree was made, and then they cast a lot to see when it was going to go out, and the lot actually landed on the furthest possible date for this. So God was giving himself some time, give himself some margin to do some work. Not that he needed it, but everybody else needed it. So Haman the Agagite was a direct descendant of King Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And in 1 Samuel chapter 15, we see God tell Saul to destroy the Amalekites and spare no one. Saul disobeys this order, and because of that disobedience, the people of God are once again facing destruction. So again, just a quick history caveat that's fascinating, but Haman was a descendant of the Amalekites. And in Samuel, we see that God told Saul, these horrible people that were enemies of the Jews, enemies of God's people, they just worked hard to just go against everything they were doing. And God told Saul and the Israelites to wipe them out, to leave no one. And the reason for that was God was trying to protect them. And Saul disobeyed. He lived with the enemy. He said, nah, we're going to keep these people alive. We're going to let it go. And now here we see Haman, centuries later, a descendant of them, once again trying to take out the Jews. This sounds pretty familiar. When we let things in our lives that God's told us to get rid of, he's told us to give to him, to move on. When we let those things stay and we try to live with them, they'll always come back. Always come back. Compromise always comes with a cost. So the cost in our story is, because of Saul's disobedience, now God's people are once again facing genocide. So picking up in chapter 4. Y'all good? You with me? Stand with me? Understand? Is it clear? Not moving too fast? Okay. So chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. He went only as far as the king's gates, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came to her and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent him nice clothes to put on instead of the sackcloth, but he didn't accept them. I think that's kind of funny. Just like, wow, send him. He seems upset. I'm going to send him some nice clothes. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had been promised to pay in the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show Esther and explain it to her. And he told her to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But it's been 30 days since I have been called to the king. When Esther's word was reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will be saved. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent to Mordecai a reply. Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days or nights. And I and my attendants will do the same. And then I will go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. That's the meat of our story right here. So we've got Haman. He makes this decree. It goes out publicly. All the Jews in the land find out, okay, we're going to be killed in a year. And the law basically stated that anyone that wanted to kill the Jews could do it. The Jews legally weren't allowed to fight back. And if you killed the Jews, you could take all their stuff. So, I mean, this is a bad deal. And Mordecai is upset. Obviously, Esther finds out. He tells Esther, you could go, you could do this. And she's like, no, I don't want to do it. And then he just convinces her. And one of my favorite things here is that he says here, says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place." I think that's powerful. When I read that, I was just like, wow, here, this wasn't a help us Obi-Wan, you're our only hope moment. It wasn't like, you're the only person that can save us, Queen Esther. You're the only hope we have. He said, hey, you have an opportunity right now to be who God made you to be. God put you in this place for this reason, for such a time as this. And if you don't take this opportunity, God's still going to save us. He's God. He's going to come through, but you'll have missed out on an opportunity to follow God and be a part of his will, and the very reason why he put you in this position. And that's just so powerful. Last week, Leah brought an awesome message on Jonah, and I know, the story of Jonah is amazing, and she's talking about how, there are people in here, people in our church, that God's called you to something, and you haven't been wanting to do it, but he's got something for you to do. You just have to go for it. And as I was preparing, I was like, God, there were definitely, and you don't have to say that this was you, but there were some people in here that were like, oh, that's a great word. Whew, that's such a good word for somebody. That's really speaking to somebody in here. Not me, but I mean, that's speaking to somebody. And I was just really praying a few weeks ago because, again, as you guys know, because you live here too, the world is just rapidly changing. The rate of just moral decay and just decadence and stuff that's just prevalent in our culture it's easy to feel overwhelmed. It's easy to feel depressed and just focus on it and be worried about it. And I was like, God, why is this continually getting so bad? And I felt like God gave me a couple of things. He said, one, it's been bad before, a lot. I mean, the city of Nineveh, pretty bad. Public executions of people, things like that. And he said just that, as I was praying, I was just like, God, I have, as you saw, Judah and Grace. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old. And I know what it was like for me growing up and the challenges I had that my parents didn't have because of the way the world has changed. And I'm just thinking, what are they going to face? Like, what stuff are they going to have to deal with? And I felt like God said this to me. He said, I knew what America was going to be like in 2023. I knew what the world was going to be like in 2023. I didn't send Paul the Apostle. I didn't send Moses. I didn't send Noah. I sent Judah and I sent Grace. And I was like, pfft. And I sent you. And I sent Brady. I sent DeMarcus. I sent Jeffrey, Matt, Pete, for such a time as this. And I think it's easy for us to think that we don't matter, or that what we do doesn't matter, or that, a calling of God is for somebody else. But every person in here, you're the only one of you that exists. Your situations, your background, your history, your experiences, where God's put you, the influence you have, you're the only one of you. And God put you there for a reason. You're not a mistake, not accidentally here in 2023. He put you here for such a time as this. And he's called us to walk in that. We are all here on purpose, every one of us, and we are called to be an integral part of God's plan to save the lost and broken world. What if we stopped ordering our lives around our wants, desires, and needs and started making God and his mission our purpose? He'll sort out the other stuff. All right, we're going to move quick. All right, so reading on to chapter 5. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, my queen? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," Esther replied, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So she took a stance, She went out there, and God showed up for her. Following God requires bravery to make a stand and faith to believe that he will take care of you when you do. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even half the kingdom will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to a banquet I will prepare for them, and then I will answer the king's question." So this, again, is one of those parts of the story that you're like, that's weird. She basically gets the king. He obviously is happy with her. He keeps offering her half of his whole kingdom. It's a pretty big deal. And she's got an opportunity to make this request and be heard, but she doesn't. And the reason she doesn't is because God's not done working. God's timing is perfect, and he is always at work, even when we don't see it. So here Esther was following the Holy Spirit. So Haman goes home. He leaves this dinner. He's feeling great about himself. He is like, man, I am the bomb. I just went to a private dinner with the king and the queen. She only asked for me. I'm second in the kingdom. I am incredible. And he's walking home like he always does, or riding his horse or whatever. And he comes to the gate, sees Mordecai. And he's just like, wow, it all comes back. Mordecai doesn't bow. He gets super angry. He goes home. You guys need to read the story because it's hilarious. But he's like complaining to his wife, and he's talking about how awesome he is. He's like, I got so much money. I've got so many sons. I've got so many servants. I got all this power. The queen loves me, and none of it matters because Mordecai is alive, and I can't stand that guy. I mean, that's literally like what it says. It's just like, wow, this guy's ridiculous. And so he's so mad. And so his wife and his council, they're like, you know what? If you're this awesome, you should just kill Mordecai. The king will give you what you want. You should build a giant gallows 50 feet tall, and you should hang him on it tomorrow. And he's like, that's a good idea. I love this idea. And so he goes to sleep. He's stoked. He's ready for tomorrow. The same night, again, here, God is working. The same night, King Xerxes leaves the dinner with Esther, goes back to the palace. Can't sleep. He's tossing and turning. He's like, I can't sleep. I need somebody to read a boring book to me, to put me to sleep. So he calls his aide. He's like, hey, go get the book of history and read me some stories, put me back to sleep. So the guy starts reading some stories, and he reads of how there was a plot to kill Xerxes, and Mordecai saved his life. And he asks his servant, he goes, this guy Mordecai, the Jew, did we do anything for him? Because he saved my life. That's a pretty big deal. And the attendant says, no, we didn't do anything for him. And he goes, oh, okay, well, we should definitely do something for him. So that's where we pick up right here. So the king's young men who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. And the king said, who's in the court right now? So yeah, I'm reading straight from the Bible here. Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows. So he prepared for him, and the king's men told him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman's walking in to ask the king to kill Mordecai. And the king is like, I need to honor this guy Mordecai. Who's out in the court? Haman, bring him in. So this, can't make this up. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? This guy. And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and whose head a royal crown is set. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most trusted nobles, and let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights. Then the king said, good, I like it. Hurry, take the robes and the horse and all you have said, and do it to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate. Leave nothing out that you have mentioned. That's hilarious. God's funny, but he ain't no joke. God's will and way are bigger and farther reaching than any evil plan or problem. Psalms 84:11 says, "For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly." So Haman took the robes and put them on Mordecai, placed him on the king's own horse, and led him through the square, shouting, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." That's my favorite part. He's got to lead him through the city shouting, "This is what the Lord does for someone he's going to honor." Ugh, I almost feel bad for him now. So here we go. We got Mordecai, who went from sackcloth and ashes to the king's robe and crown. God can turn any situation around. Just don't give up and don't give in. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Galatians 6:9. Judd's going to go ahead and join me on the stage. Try to get off here. All right, so picking our story, back up. So Haman just did this. He had to lead Mordecai around. When it's all done, Mordecai just goes back to the gate, goes back to his job, because that's who Mordecai is. He didn't need that. Probably didn't want that. Went back, just starts doing what he's doing. Haman gets home feeling scared and dejected now, because how can he, pull off what he wants to do now? Because essentially Mordecai has been placed in this extreme place of honor with the king, and he wants to kill him. So now Mordecai's wife and his people are like, "Whoa, man, you are this ain't looking good for you. You really should get out of here." But right as he's trying to figure out what he should do, the king's royal guards show up, and they're like, "Hey, you're about to be late for dinner with the king and queen, remember? Come on." So he doesn't really even have time to figure out what he's going to do. So they get back to dinner with the king and Esther, and Haman's sitting there. And again, I can't imagine what's going through this bro's mind. He's probably still in some senses thinking, okay, I lost here because Mordecai got honored, but I'm still going to win. I'm still going to annihilate all the Jews, and I'm still sitting here at a banquet with the king. And the king asks Esther, he says, "What is it? What do you want?" And she says, "If I found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, please give me my life and give me and my people their lives. We've been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, sold to be massacred, eliminated. If we had just been sold into slavery, I wouldn't have even bothered you with it. But we've been sold to die." The king replied, "Who did this? Where is he? Who is this monster?" See, Haman didn't realize that there was someone closer to the king than him. His wife should have got that. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who dared to do such a thing?" And Esther said, "An adversary and enemy, the vile Haman." I bet at that moment Haman's face fell off. It was like, oh my goodness, what is happening right now? Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage, left his wine, went out of the palace. Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg to the queen. This is where the story just gets sad for Haman, because this guy, he's bumbling around, he's freaking out, he's trying to plead for the queen to somehow save his life. He goes over to her. The king stormed out. He's mad. Haman trips and he falls on top of Esther on the couch right as the king walks in, and he just sees this bro laying on top of his wife on the couch, and he says, "Will he even attack the queen while she's in my house with me?" And as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And then Habano, one of the king's servants attending him, said, "A pole gallows reaching the height of 50 cubits stands at the house of Haman. He had set it up to kill Mordecai, whom spoke up to help you." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they took him there at once. The bigger the challenge or difficulty, the greater the grace and the victory. No matter what's going on in your life, no matter what you're facing, we serve a God that's always at work, and his plans are always greater. Genesis 50:20 says, "The very thing the enemy has designed to destroy you could be the thing God will use to destroy the work of the enemy in your life." The devil likes to take those things we struggle with, those fold points, and he likes to keep bringing them back. He likes to keep destroying us with the same thing. But just like a weld makes metal stronger when it's connected, God can take those things and he can use them for victory in our life, victory in the lives of others, for such a time as this. The king gave Haman's estate and all he had to Esther and made Mordecai second in command over the entire kingdom. Then he told Mordecai to write whatever law he could think of that would save the Jews and put the king's seal on it. So a law went out saying that the Jews were allowed to fight back and that anyone that attacked them would lose all possessions and belongings to the Jews. So when the day of genocide came, the Jews won a resounding victory, and the faithfulness of God was commemorated by the Feast of Purim, which is still celebrated in the Jewish community today. The only way the enemy can overcome the power of God's promise in your life is to get you to stop believing in them and in him. What a story. If you take anything away from this 40-minute rambling, talking as fast as I can to try to cram this in, what I want you to take away is God put you here for such a time as this. The spaces in your life, the people around you, the things you get to do, they matter. They matter a lot. If God could take an orphan girl, make her queen, and help her save all of her people, he can use each and every one of us to do incredible, incredible things for his kingdom. You are here on purpose, destined by God for this place and for this season, for this time. We're going to jump back into the song, but I want to invite you guys to response with every head bowed and eye closed. If there's anyone in this place this morning that you don't believe me, you don't believe that you matter, you don't believe that you're called, you don't believe that what you do will make a difference, or maybe you do, but you don't know how God could work or what way there could be, then I want you to raise your hand. And I want you to know that you're wrong. God can and will use you, and you do matter. And he puts you here on purpose, for a purpose. Dear Jesus, I thank you for who you are. I thank you that you're good. I thank you that you constantly remind us of how big you are, how far-reaching you are. What a planner you are, God. So much so that you saw each and every one of us, God, and you put us here for such a time as this. And I pray that everyone under the sound of my voice would leave here today feeling encouraged and inspired to live for you, to stand firm and love well, that the world would see you through them and through the things they do, that they would know that the decisions they make matter for them and they matter for everyone else. I pray that you would seal it in our hearts, God. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.